Hi, and welcome to the walkthrough for the Week to Engage session. This video is for those who aren't able to make it to their usual tutorial. So this is me walking through each activity that we're doing in the Engage session so that you can have a go at those activities yourself. You might like to pause this video as you go and work through each activity one at a time. The chapter that we're working from this week is chapter 6 of Tate on social class. So the activities that we'll be doing draw heavily from the concepts that Tate explores. So if you haven't read the chapter yet, it will be best for you to go back and read the chapter and then come back and have a go at the activities. So we're working around these three myths around social class. We're using a critical approach to understand the way that schooling constructs educational success and the way we conceptualize this idea of individual ability and how we might consider other factors that influence and affect individuals' ability. We're also really thinking deeply about what social class actually is and the idea that it's actually more than just about money and economic capital. You might choose to focus on one of these three myths in your second group assignment. So it might be worth making sure that you have a really solid understanding of what each myth is and what the evidence is that debunks that myth. You might like to have a go at the activation task here, the knowledge check. So each week on Blackboard under week 2 here, you'll find a short quiz. It's not for marks or anything like that. It's just for you to check your knowledge, and it's based on the reading. Okay, so what you've read in the textbook. So it's just a really nice quick way for you to check your understanding of those key concepts. The first Engage activity this week is asking the question, does inequality exist in Australia? So there's a short clip for you to watch, and you can find the link in the document with all the links for the Engage session this week. So after you watch that clip, have a think about whether you have been aware of social class growing up, or is it something that you only became aware of later in life or perhaps now? And, I think that as we get older and have more experiences in different settings, we can start to see social class in different ways. And we can sort of observe the many diverse ways that social class affects people and their opportunities and their successes. So this activity is asking you to think about that. It also is asking us to think about the long-term implications of poverty and in particular homelessness, and broadening how we understand this idea of homelessness, that it's not necessarily just about having a roof over your head. So there's some statistics there for you to think about. And we're ultimately asking, is Australia the land of the fair? And if not, what are some of the ways that inequality might exist? So that's activity 1. Activity 2 is a comic strip called On a Plate. So again, you'll be able to click on the link and see the whole comic. So it's a really nice comic that looks at children's trajectory. So looking at children from a young age and following them through into adulthood and how social class can affect their opportunities. It also raises this idea that negative effects can become cumulative, just as positive effects can as well. And it asks us to think about the capital that is present in a child's life in the early years, how that might actually set children up for different kinds of trajectories, different opportunities later in life. So I really like this comic. I think it's such a pertinent example of the long-term effects of social class. So that's just a bit of an overview of the comic strip. The third activity is asking us to think about social class and the COVID-19 pandemic. So there's an article from The Guardian that looks at how the pandemic has affected different social groups. So you're asked to have a look at how social class affects groups differently and what examples and evidence are provided in the article. So you'll need to read the article and go through and look at each example that's given, each social group. For example, older people are one focus group, and what evidence is given around the implications of the pandemic on that particular social group. You might also think about more specifically, really zoom in on how it might affect children and their education, particularly thinking back to 2020 and that period in Queensland and elsewhere, particularly Victoria, the long period of lockdown, and how education might have been affected for families differently during that period of time, depending on the resources that the parents have. So think about, children who were very successful and comfortable and confident during home learning. Well, why might that have been? What kind of resources might the family have had, not just economic, that might have helped them to have a more positive experience? And then think about some of the challenges for families and how we might cut that up across different social groups. Now, activity 4 is getting into some theory around social class. So you will have read in the textbook, Tate gives a really nice overview of Bourdieu's social class framework. So we're thinking about not just economic capital, not just money for social class. We're also thinking about the things that people have, say, do, and know. So here, see if you can think of some examples of those different forms of capital. There's some examples down on the bottom right here. So we're going to take this social class framework now, and we're going to think about what kinds of capital schools most value. What would the ideal student in Australian classes be like? So what forms of capital are highly valued and which aren't? So, think about just such a broad range of things. You could think about children's behaviour when they come to school. So when children walk to the classroom, what do we expect them to know and to be able to do? When we might do a reading group, when a child picks up a book, what's some of the capital that we would ideally ask students to have with them already? Is it something around knowing how to pick up a book and hold it the right way up? Knowing how to engage with the book. We read the title. We have a look at the back. We hold the book this way, and this is how we turn the page. Think about some of those early behaviours, and then think also about later in school. What about what we expect students to know and be able to do in terms of approaching an assessment task? What about behaviours in class? If I have a question, what should I do? Do I need to put my hand up? There's all sorts of ideal behaviours and forms of capital that Australian schools typically expect or that are highly valued. Now, that's not to say that this is ideal and that there aren't other forms of capital that we should be valuing, or that we perhaps shouldn't always assume that students come with this particular form of capital already. This isn't an activity asking you to reinforce what we expect at schools. This is asking us to observe, what do we expect children to come to school with, and how realistic is that? And how are children differently placed to already have that capital? If children come to school already knowing how to engage with a book, what kind of advantage does that give them? And for the children who don't come with that knowledge, what can we do to support them better? So this activity is about being aware of what schools implicitly expect students to have and to be able to do, and then thinking about, 1, what advantage that can give, and 2, how can we support those who might not have those valued forms of capital? How can we support them so that they can have an equal opportunity for success at school? So have a think about that distinction between what schools tend to expect and how we could look at it differently. Okay, so rather than reinforcing, we're observing and thinking about this from an equity perspective. Now, activity 6 gives us a couple of examples of children and their virtual school bag. So this is Kim, and these are the things that she has in her virtual school bag. So she speaks different languages, she loves music, she understands the restaurant trade, she's got knowledge about these different countries, and she understands that school is important. And then we have Vicky, who can write and speak English very well. She's got well-schooled reading behaviours, so sort of what I was saying about this, perhaps she reads for leisure, for pleasure. Knowledge about the white colonial history of Australia. She understands about popular culture and the web, and she understands how schools are organised. So for each of these students, you need to create a profile based on Bourdieu's notion of economic capital on one hand and cultural capital on the other. And think about this in relation to attending school in inner North Brisbane. So using a strengths-based approach, consider both the opportunities and challenges for each child. So what opportunities might they have by coming to school with these forms of capital already? And then what might some of the challenges be? What kind of, in what ways might these different things in their school bag be valued in school? Are these all valued by schools, these kinds of knowledge? Are they valued? Are there things that might be missing that would help these children to have a more successful experience of school and give them different opportunities? Okay, activity 7 is a socio-self-analysis. So applying the same kind of logic here, have a think about yourself and your experience and what kinds of capital you think you might have. So you can sketch your own socio-self-analysis using Bourdieu's terms. So you might do up a little table with each form of capital as a heading, so economic, cultural, social, symbolic, and reflect on your own experiences and think about how your own types of capital might have helped you in your schooling. Perhaps you've had a sibling who's already gone through school, and perhaps they could help you with some of the assignments that you received or the exams that you did. You might think about that in relation to starting university. For those of you who have friends or family who've gone to uni and uni is just the norm, well, how might that actually be helping you? And in contrast, if you're a first in family at university, what might some of the opportunities and challenges be there? So this is asking you to reflect on yourself and your own experiences and kind of theorize yourself in terms of capital and the kinds of capital that you have that might have given you opportunities and some that might present challenges. Okay, activity 8 is about this concept of meritocracy that Tate discusses in the textbook as well. This idea that if only we have enough brains and we try hard enough, we can do anything, we can be successful, very much like the American dream. So it individualizes success, and it bases success solely on personal ability alone. It doesn't take account of those other things that we're talking about today around economic and cultural inequity. So we're thinking about this here. This is a very popular classroom display. You might have seen it on social media shared around. So it's a wall that asks children to meet the person responsible for your choices, grades, success, words, and actions. So thinking about what you now know about how children's lives are shaped by their social class, what might the problem be with a classroom display like this? And see if you can make that link between this idea of a meritocracy and individualizing success and failures, and how children might experience a classroom display like this. And finally, activity 9 is applying Bourdieu's concepts to the My School profile for Kelvin Grove State College. So there's 2 links here, one to the school profile, which gives you an indication of the ICSEA score. So that's a measure of socioeconomic advantage. And also NAPLAN scores, thinking that we can use NAPLAN results as one way to understand a school's context. So you're asked to create a community profile for the Kelvin Grove community based on economic and cultural capital, just as you did for the virtual school bag. So think about what some of the opportunities and challenges might be for children and youth growing up in this context, and as a teacher working with families in this context. So we're sort of making some educated guesses about the kinds of capital that students and families in this community might have, and how that might give them certain opportunities in their education and provide some challenges for their education. And what would it be like for you as a teacher working in this context with families who have these particular types of capital? So the other important work that's happening in the week to engage is looking at the group assessment task. So this is assessment 2. The first is your quick multiple choice exam. This is the second that we'll be working on a little bit each week. So a large part of this week is forming groups. So if you haven't heard from your tutor, if they haven't contacted you, if you were absent from the week to engage, then please get in touch with them around how you can join a group. So it's a group presentation and a written plan. So it's important that you have a really close read of the task sheet to understand what the requirements here are. We're thinking this week about how it what it means to work in a group effectively, okay? This is very much, what is going to happen when you're teaching, working in groups to prepare resources, to prepare plans, curriculum documents and so forth. So we have to think about what a high functioning team looks like and how can we as individuals present ourselves as a valuable and valued team member. So you can think about how a high functioning team looks, sounds and feels. There's a YouTube clip that you can watch there around this. And we'll also look at different roles that team members can play, okay? Looking at this distinction between task-focused roles and maintenance roles. So maintenance roles are those that look at project management, cohesion, getting things done, as opposed to tasks that look at elements of the task itself. So there's a couple of links there for you to think more closely about the different team roles that you have. And then lastly, thinking about the expectations that we have for our team. Okay, it's really important to be clear about that right from the beginning, about what we all expect from one another. And that gives us the best opportunity to have a positive and successful experience in our team for this assignment. So that's all for week 2. Remember that you can have a go at each activity. And if there's anything that you are really unsure about or that you'd like to talk about more, you can get in touch with your tutor, either via email or perhaps see if you can catch them in your class in week 3. Have a great week.